Hello, Sue. Thank you for joining me in an episode of Peace is an Action Verb podcast, and so grateful to have you as a guest.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, I'm going to just introduce you from how I know you and then give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So, you and I met in an online group for women who celebrate nature and are interested in preserving and planting trees. And so we became friends in this online community, and that's why I'm in California and you're in England, and we know each other.
Yes, that's correct.
Yep. So, would you like to introduce yourself? A little bit about you.
Okay. My name's Sue Bodkin, and I live in a little village in Kent in the UK. I live alone, and I met Christine, as she said, through the Tree Sisters group, and also I have three children, three boys, and I have now how many? Lose count. I think it's six grandchildren and two great grandchildren, which is a joy. What else would you like to know?
Well, I think that's perfect. That's a wonderful introduction. So, I have in front of me a clipboard with a list of verbs. And
Mm-hmm.
when you and I were chatting the other day, we were actually more gravitating towards a specific noun, and that noun was creativity. So I think we're probably going to be focusing mostly on that today. But as we go through the conversation, if I hear a verb here and there, I will pull it out of the conversation and give us a moment to notice it. So, Sue, I know that you are a very creative person, and that is an important part of your expression of self and also how you move through life. And so, I remember you shared with me a delightful shadow puppet uh, production, basically, that you had done for one of your grandchildren, I think it was. And
Yes.
so I know that you do that, but I think you do quite more than that. And so, what would you like to talk about in creativity?
Oh gosh, I think creativity is part of my essence. And before we were due to do the interview, I really thought about and reflected, uh, almost like a bit of a timeline. And before I share what projects I get involved with, I think I want to just mention and acknowledge both my parents because um, they're both dead now. But I remember one of my earliest memories of being in the kitchen and my mum pottering about in the kitchen when I was very tiny, a baby or toddler. And she would specifically allow me the freedom to have a particular cupboard, and I was allowed to open the cupboard door and take out pots and either mess about with the lids or build with them or have a wooden spoon. And sometimes we would start doing musical sort of nursery rhymes, and I would do some rhythm on the pot. And also, like my dad would, when I was going to bed before I went to sleep, he would create these amazing stories. And he didn't always use a book, so he would create stories or songs, and he would do these amazing voices of the characters, usually animals or nature based sort of tales. And I suddenly realized what a gift I had from such an early age. And then later, when I was growing up at home, my mum would allow other children to come round and put newspaper on the table, and we'd just do messy play. And sometimes I was allowed to go in the garden and sit in the muddy sink and get all muddy and messy, and she wasn't all, oh no, can't get messy. So I was given a very strong appreciation of being playful and having fun with materials or objects, And I think that stayed with me. So I suppose my creativity, often I get inspiration from everyday life, but sometimes I have to have a particular uh, theme, or someone's maybe there's a birthday coming up, or maybe a granddaughter's been born, or something that stirs my heart, and then I maybe start a project. Like when my granddaughter was born, um, I thought, oh, I'd love to make her a quilt, and I've never
Mm.
quilted before.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
but I found a way to make it my own, and created a beautiful quilt. Not perhaps in the traditional way, but that to me doesn't matter. It's the actual process of discovering and exploring and making mistakes and not getting too judgmental about that. And
Do you,
when I,
Sue, sorry to
sorry,
interrupt you. There's been so many incredible verbs that have just flown by, and that. Do you mind if I take a moment and just reflect back on some of the things I
no,
heard you
of
say?
course not.
So the image of your mom in the kitchen, right? So your mom was preparing meals to share together, which is actually on the list of verbs that I had come up with as piece verbs, is sharing meals together. And then she did something remarkable and powerful, which was she gave you your own space. And it was like she recognized your individuality and your need, and how nourishing it is to from a young age have control over something, or a physical space. And then she allowed you to make noise, right? So pots and pans are marvelously noisy.
You
And
shouldn't exactly call it music sometimes.
she invited you to make a joyful noise.
Mm,
And music is really so very much that, a joyful noise. And then
yes.
the two of you would create together that music, and also the storytelling element. So those were some of the verbs I heard from your mom. And then your father, he nurtured, well, they both nurtured you quite obviously, but his way of telling you bedtime stories. And I think uh, across different cultures, storytelling from elder to child is hugely important as a piece verb, as a way of showing kinship and support and love. And then he tapped into that place of imagination, which is
Mm.
such a magical place, and even brought voices into it. So he was like your very own personal theater in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you were loved in a very active way. And the other thing I'm hearing, and it's actually on the list of verbs, um, I have be alone and I have be together as two verbs on the list when I thought of you. And it's so interesting how in a kitchen, you and your mom being together, she also is letting you be alone, right? Because she says, here's your cupboard, here's your shelf or your drawer in the cupboard, and she's letting you have that balance even within the same shared space together. So, oh, and then there's make a mess. Make a mess needs to be on this list, right? Especially for children, and even us adults, as we are allowing ourselves to be, the child that we still are. Is making a mess is a really important part of play, and also creativity. So I think I'm caught up now on highlighting verbs. So please continue the story.
Okay. And I was thinking that my mum was at one stage, she was working, she was at home, she was a sort of a traditional housewife, as they say. Um, but she also escaped sometimes to play in a band.
Oh my
She,
gosh.
yeah, yeah. She played in working men's clubs.
Oh wow.
She had a band. She was part of a band and she played guitar. And then later, she allowed me to go to one of the sessions of the band where I was invited to join them and sing something. And I was incredibly nervous. And then I remembered also that apart from the cupboard thing, uh, she said apparently when I was quite young, when we would sing sometimes together, just for the joy of it, I would automatically harmonize.
You're kidding.
No,
Wow. That's
and
that's on my list of verbs for you.
I know I noticed the harmonize because I was thinking that, and I still have that today. It's like I went to I went to Prague, and I saw this puppet theatre performance, and they were singing in their language. And although I didn't know the language, I was sort of humming in the audience in a slight harmonized, not interrupting or being too loud, but
Sure.
just because it was needing to participate and join with them because they were
Yeah.
doing a lovely song. And my friend next to me said, "How can you do that?" And I said, "It's just natural." I said, "But I obviously I don't do it all the time." But sometimes it's almost like it's moved through my heart and my spirit to join in something where I'm experiencing an aliveness and a joy. And I think that's very much, I'm recognizing very much due, more than I realized, to some of the parents' permissions I was given as a child, or encouragement. And
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
And also your mom. So you think about marriage. You think about the space of marriage and your mom and your dad allowing your mom. Well, it's not that he was allowing, more that he was blessing, right? Blessing the activity of playing a guitar in a rock and roll band in clubs. That's a beautiful.
well, it
Um,
wasn't rock and roll, to be honest. It was
oh
more.
no.
It was, well, that generation. It was more working men's clubs. It wasn't rock. It was more popular, mainstream, bit folky, bit
Okay.
jazzy, uh, that sort of thing. She wasn't an electric guitar; it was an acoustic guitar.
Acoustic guitar. So nonetheless, your mom was out there in
Yeah,
clubs,
yeah.
and
And that was partly out of practicality because sometimes my dad was, at that time, he was doing a lot of building type work. So often we were quite short of funds, and so
right,
part of the issue of mum going out was to actually add to the income of the family.
right,
uh,
right,
at
which
least
is
she was able to tap into a gift, and was
absolutely.
quite adventurous in some ways too, because that was like a time when women weren't really. I mean, it was funny actually because my mum and I had some quite difficult times in our relationship, like all mum and daughters
Like
did.
all of us, for sure.
But I suppose since I've been going through the grieving process, I've been trying to forgive and understand her perspective of some of the challenges she was facing as she was bringing us up, and also the difficulties sometimes between that were going on in the marriage, that often in many marriages. And I became quite feminist, and at one stage, and my mum was, she found that quite challenging. And I'm not sure fully what that was all about, other than I appreciate, for her, I think sometimes she would feel she was devoting a lot for her family, but didn't have much space for herself. So, like you were saying earlier, this thing of being together and being alone. My mum really, although she chose to devote time to the family, sometimes that would get very difficult. And sometimes my dad was really lovely in lots of ways, and he was great fun with us children, but she would have to be the one that sort of put in some boundaries, or was
Right,
one that was seen as the big bad giant sometimes.
right. So on the list
But
of
I'm
verbs
telling you all the good
is
stuff,
no. So
because
but on the list of verbs is find and hold healthy boundaries,
yeah,
and also balance. And so for any marriage, especially a marriage with children, there's both of those things are going to be figured out, or tested or struggled with. I think in any
Yeah,
family setting for sure, and
absolutely.
so quite amazing how it's a simple thing your mom did in allowing you to make noise in the kitchen and having your own little space, and yet what a foundational
Yeah,
act of love.
absolutely. And there was one occasion, I must tell you this, but do tell me if you're running out of time because I'm
No,
aware.
no, no. We have as much
Um,
time as you have.
okay,
Yeah.
well, my mum, she got asked to go and do a like a charity event at a hospital, and we were meant to be going as part of other performers. And then when we got there, they'd all pulled out.
Oh my goodness.
So my poor mum, well, she wasn't. She was amazing. She because she played in the band, and because she and I had practiced songs together at home, we hadn't planned to sing them that night, but we ended up filling the whole slot. And,
Wow.
and the music was piped through to patients on the ward who were wearing headphones, and we
Oh my
were on a
goodness.
theatre stage, and it was recorded and piped through to patients on the wards. And we did such an amazing range of silly, funny, sad, all sorts of songs, some very mainstream. And I got the opportunity then, and I don't know how old I was actually. I was probably only about 13.
Mm.
Um, and I got an opportunity to do a song a cappella without
Mm-hmm.
music, and I sang this lovely song that I still sing now in the shower, and sometimes when people want me to,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is by Joan Baez.
Mm-hmm.
And my mum was quite into her. Again, I really admired my mum's very active in the outside world in terms of what was going on. And Joan Baez was someone who was very much for peace
Right.
and protest, and an active person with music. Anyway, the song I did was wasn't an activist song. It was just it was a song about making illicit whiskey, actually, called Copper Kettle.
Oh,
But
funny.
I sang it solo with a microphone on this stage with nobody else watching, but being piped through. And later we got feedback from one of the patients who was so moved by it. They were in tears and were so grateful. And
Oh,
so it really encouraged me that I could touch through the voice, of making me feel quite emotional, actually.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and through my mum's help, and encouragement, it actually touched that other person, and they knew the song. It brought back memories for them, and then I saw and understood from quite a young age the power of sharing your gifts in even small ways,
mm,
not as a big celebrity, but just in life, and finding ways to connect and to inspire other people. And that's what I love about the creative side, is not just when I'm alone being creative, although that's very healing for me.
mm-hmm.
But I also have enjoyed the times when I've been able to work with other people to find their gifts or spark off their own creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And often we, especially adults, we're very got our big inner critic, including me,
Mm,
which judges us before we even can put a mark down,
mm-hmm.
because we don't think we're good enough, or we haven't got the right materials, or there's all these thoughts or judgments going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I still struggle with that sometimes myself, but I also know that if there's a particular project or a workshop where I can work with either children or adults in a imaginative, as you said earlier, imaginative, playful, fun way to somehow break down those barriers and make a connection. It's just really rewarding, and uh, I have such great fun as well. Sometimes it's quite a lot of work to get it simple enough to do that, beforehand. But the
Sure.
act is really really in really great for me too. And I've used my creative skill to heal myself on many times when I've been in a dark space. I can sometimes write or do pictures and not have any particular thing in mind, but just literally start playing with color
Mm.
or shapes. Or often I like get inspired by nature,
Hmm.
where I feel at one with the trees. Or like recently, I'll tell you something. Recently, it was really lovely. A friend of mine, Hazel, she's recently written a book called Beyond Words,
Hmm.
and it's given like a list of 101 activities to spark your creativity.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, really, really interesting book. Um, and one of the exercises is to just go into a sort of quite relaxed, not meditative state, but just be present. I know people find that difficult because they're often busy and they don't make time for themselves. But if you can just get in that space where you can breathe quietly and just calmly, and just imagine if you were, I don't know, a creature, an animal or something, and what animal would come up.
Mm.
And it made me laugh because she told a story in her book about how she was hoping she was going to be some panther
Right.
around being powerful, and she got something like a parrot, and she was really disappointed. But then she realized that she was actually, the parrot was very significant for her,
Uh-huh.
because of her own reasons. But when I did it this time round, having looked at the exercise in her book, um, I got a dragonfly.
Oh,
And
wow.
I thought that is such a spiritual, to me, a very magical creature,
They are
because,
magical creatures.
yeah, and it was about transformation for me, or making the most of this moment, because
Mm.
dragonflies don't live for long. And so it was incorporating for me things about how life is so delicate and fragile at times, and with all the chaos around us in the world, the wars, the violence, the change of laws, that all that,
Mm.
that are not necessarily what I agree with.
Hmm.
um, this dragonfly somehow reminded me to cherish the the sort of well of love under all this stuff.
Mm.
Anyway, I actually took the idea of the dragonfly, because it had come to me when I did this little meditation after reading her exercise, and I took my journal and I went over to my favorite place near where I live, which is like a common with some woods and a
Hmm.
lovely pond. And I thought, I'm just going to sit by the pond and write something in my journal, maybe a little poem about dragonfly or something, and see what happens. Anyway, I was sitting there, and literally nothing really was coming. Anyway, I walked round the edge of the pond, and just as I was coming to a certain part where the reeds were very high, a beautiful, real dragonfly flew out towards
Mm.
me, and it was the most gorgeous, with translucent wings and blue, this striking blue, and it was zigzagging,
Oh, wow.
and I just thought that is incredible. That that little exercise I've manifested. I'm not saying it's me; it's channeled through a dragonfly's coming to greet me for real,
So,
and
sorry,
that's
I
my
want you to finish that thought, but then I wanted to take us back through the conversation we've just explored and look at the verbs. I heard several of them coming by. So you found the dragonfly. The dragonfly was zigging back and forth. And I'm sorry. Please finish your thought.
It's all right. Uh, and so I was able to be so grateful. That's another word you've got,
That's right.
um, because it was something uh, almost like, because I was focusing in my inner self on this idea of what does the dragonfly mean for me and all that, and then to actually walk in nature, I was gifted with the real thing, almost to celebrate whatever thoughts I was having, and I was able to create a little poem and share it with the group of women who were following the book. So those are just some examples.
So if I could take you back through the last few minutes of conversation here, I think there's a couple universal experiences that you described. One of them is that inner critic, so the voice that we have, whether it's about our creativity or any other aspect of ourself that we are considering to be less than acceptable or less than capable, and all of those less thans.
Yeah.
You described an intention setting for yourself and for other people. So it was like maybe a way of holding hope or holding focus or holding vision that, well, there's that inner critic, but there's something greater in me. There's something greater in you. There's something greater in every being. And you were holding on to a joy and also a purpose of helping people make that connection with their beauty, with their capability, with their creativity. And so so the first important verb I felt that you had was just an acceptance. You accepted that there is the inner critic, and then you aimed your focus on the deeper beauty and wellspring of life and creativity in you and in everyone else around you. And then you prepared. You said, I give workshops, and it's this magical moment when I help other people connect with their true creativity. So I help them clear out that inner critic voice. I help them connect with their creativity, but it's a lot of work to get ready for that. So there was this sense of setting the vision, understanding that place and that connection, these moments of connection are so important. And then you do a lot of work to create a very simple exchange between you as teacher and them as student. And it seems to me that you as teacher and them as student has a similarity to your mom and you in terms of giving them a creative space. When
Yes.
you're holding a workshop, you're creating a creative space.
Yeah. And I learn when it's teacher student, I feel also sometimes I have to really work on getting myself out of the way too. So, in other words, not being too helpful when I'm not being asked to help, or not being too directive, but actually fostering a safe space where people got materials, they maybe have a theme, or but that it's not actually to create something that I've done. It's more to facilitate their own creative expression. So
So you're
I,
creating a space and actually also holding a space, and you are
yeah,
keeping
hope.
your own ego in check, right? Which is, I think, another that's very. I think the ego that we keep in check is a brother or sister to the inner critic, right? It's like one of those aspects of self-management that
Yes.
allows for the greater self to come through the smaller selves. So that was a very special interaction I wanted to pull the verbs out from. And then this next interaction you're talking about, the exercise of the firefly and the quieting yourself. So coming to a place of presence and
Yeah,
stillness, which is
absolutely.
about being nonverbal. So, your friend who's written this book about ways to be nonverbal or outside of language and words and that sort of thinking. And one of the exercises is to connect with an animal, and which animal then comes through. And the magic, the magic of what it is that we do with our thoughts and our feelings and our imagination, and then how that reflects back to us in the physical world that we are embodying and walking around in, and those moments of connection where you can see, oh my goodness, this work that I'm doing here and here is now reflecting back to me in the
Mm.
most magical and wondrous of ways in the beings around me. And you spoke of the commons and being in nature and the water and the land and the firefly and the reeds. And I just wanted to reflect culturally how wonderful it is in the British tradition that there are commons, and that when we walk around here, in California, for example, we would call it a park.
Yes.
But the fact that you call it a common implies a shared space, implies a shared ownership, or not even ownership so much as connection, that this is a place of connection, this is a place of sharing. And so I just wanted to also recognize the beauty in
Yes.
that. So
Yeah.
I think I'm caught up with you, in terms of finding the verbs, but that was a lovely couple of stories there. And
Right.
also that
Oh,
your
right.
friend is holding a space by writing that book, right? So her creativity in is very much like what you're talking about you doing, and she's facilitating opportunities for self connection. So it's again that aloneness and that togetherness, because when you read a book you're alone, right? When you're writing a book you're alone, and yet there's that thread of connection that happens in that interaction.
Yeah. I actually also want to acknowledge that she herself um, would never have written that book without the encouragement of other women that were uh, inspired by her own offerings. And another woman that's been absolutely supportive and influential is Anna Atkinson. And she is an amazing woman who I've known for a while in different contexts, but she set up what's called the Wonky Women Group.
Hmm.
And it's like a group where we're allowed to be wonky, and we can be perfect in our imperfections and support each other. And we've been doing a group for about a year, so it's quite a long-term commitment.
Can I,
um,
sorry, Sue, may I interrupt you for a moment? Because wonky is a word that I hear, but I'm not even exactly sure what it means, especially since you and I speak the same language, but with different, uh,
I think I
cultural
think if,
contexts. So can you
yeah.
tell me from your
Mm.
perspective
I
more
suppose
about the,
if you asked individual women within the group what they thought wonky was, I'm sure we would come up with different meanings even
sure.
within our own language. But for me, it's uh, the permission to be ourselves, our true selves, and not um, what society or our parents or our history or our culture defines for us, and for it to be okay to explore that wonky times when we perhaps don't do what's expected, and that we have a voice and a place to share what's really going on, rather than trying to be how perhaps we are normally expected in other roles.
So
So
it's
it's been
it's a
absolutely
permission.
fantastic. Mm,
It's it's a
yeah,
space of permission.
yeah, yeah, and acceptance and support. Um, it's been amazing to be connected with women like that, and like yourself, at times when I've needed support myself. when my creativity's dried up for a while, or I've been in the depths of grief, or transitions where I feel like I'm going through another transformation. Because obviously, if you're growing and if you're transforming, it's not an easy process, is it? you,
It's probably in the same way that for a dragonfly to go through three different
yeah,
stages of life cycle, and each one of them requires a shape shift.
yeah,
That must be very uncomfortable.
yeah,
But
exactly. But it's like, yeah, I. That's what the creativity has kept me. Um, yeah, permission to be myself, and either I do it therapeutically with myself on my own, or I can join other people. And sometimes I don't do it therapeutically. I just have some fun. Like I moved to look after my dad from a very creative place when I was living in Hastings and St Leonard's. And at first, when my dad died and I was living in a different space, a different town, and lost all my connections.
and
Um,
wasn't that during COVID, Sue?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Um, that was quite a difficult time to find my connections within myself and with other people. But what I found was the group that Anna did, she was doing it on Zoom. So not only was I involved with her while my dad was ill, because she was doing a group then that I was involved with, and she actually encouraged my dad and me to do some creative stuff together. And that was amazing because he was so not well and very negative. And to actually, she talked to him on Zoom because I asked him first if he wanted to talk to her, and he likes an attractive woman, a young woman to speak to him. He was quite happy to do that. And
Oh,
she
funny.
he was very funny, lots of fun. And Anna, of course, was very pleased that he was willing to have
Yes, I'm
another
sure.
go at something he hadn't done for years. And so yeah, the power of creativity when people have lost their way, and somehow you can um, encourage or hook them back into something that they have within them but they've forgotten is beautiful.
Yes, and so that's another verb process that I'm hearing you talk about, this theme of writing oneself or finding one's way back home or finding one's way back to that sense of wellness, that there's an inherent and intuitive understanding that you have, and I believe we all have, for finding ourselves back to well-being or to that sensation of knowing that we are in our own self, that we are back in our creativity and our beingness. And so you've described being able to do this for yourself, but you've also pointed out how critically important it is to have these, I'm going to call them earth angels, these people that show up at the right time when you need that help, when you are struggling to find your way back yourself. And for your dad to be in that place towards the end of his life where his physical health was failing, and then to find himself in a mental space that was dark, as I think we can all understand would happen or would be likely to happen in that scenario, especially with the society around being locked
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
The
that made a big impact on him particularly. Yeah,
and so
yeah,
then for this lovely young woman to want to have a conversation with him, that help came along in the form that was palatable and also inviting to him.
yeah,
It wasn't like you said, yeah, my 70-year-old male friend wanted to have a conversation with my dad. And I mean, although you know, maybe that might have sparked something else for him, like
Mm.
some kind of camaraderie or brotherhood. But you're describing an earth angel showing up at the right time for you and for your dad, and
Yeah,
being able to gently guide you back to yourself, or create a pathway that you were then able to follow. And it's related to creativity. It's
yeah.
related. So the act of creating. So when you're talking about the act of creation, it's more than just sitting down and doing something with your mind and your hands or your voice, right? It's also something about being still and finding the doorway or the spark. Can you tell me what your dad, like, what was that process between you and Anna and your dad?
Well, I think what happened was my dad was, as you say, quite physically challenged, and yet quite vocal and quite in tune with what was going on the news and shouting at the telly.
Right,
So
right.
he was going slightly. He got dementia coming, but what was lovely was what happened. It was almost like I was wishing and trying to manifest a way of reaching him, and I just thought, maybe art might, if there was some way to reach him where he was, not imposing it on him, because he
Right.
he he hadn't he what and he was. I say he is. He's not here. I keep forgetting. He was quite creative himself because he could play music, and uh, so when Anna suggested, did I want to be part of this art group? That was before the Wonky Women group. I said, "Oh, I'd really love it because I'm here with Dad, and I'd love to get out my paints. And if I'm doing it, maybe he might be a little bit interested in what I'm doing, and just very gently see if he wants to pick up a paintbrush." Really, anyway, I did start doing it with her, and he was just watching me and, "Oh, what are you doing, Sue?" And then he'd come over and look at what I was painting, and then it got to the point where we'd finished the group. Actually, like he started it with me in a way, but what was lovely was that Anna at the end actually came on and was sort of speaking to everybody who was in the group, and she spoke to me, and I said, and then my dad said, "Oh, can I speak to Anna? I want to thank her."
Oh, lovely.
So he did this little video um, of speaking to Anna, who he'd never met, but was very grateful that she'd sparked him off to do this picture, and I've still got the picture today,
Oh my goodness.
and it's a beautiful, just very simple. I mean, he just did it. It was just like a still life. It was just orange and orange, but he's done it in such a lovely way. Um, and so I sort of, she didn't sort of invite him in at the beginning, really. I was doing it, but what was lovely was that without her offering the group, I wouldn't have perhaps been in a place to be ready to take her up on it. And then also it gave me an opportunity to get Dad alongside when he was up to it. Some days he didn't want to do it. And then after that, when he was not wanting to paint, he quite liked doing those sort of colouring books. So I got him some of those, and he did a few of those and quite enjoyed it. And that meant he had some peace for himself, rather than watching all the terrible negative news all day long if it was on. So that was really that was not only a window of creativity for him, but also some peace for both of us,
Yes,
where
that's
I
right.
wasn't trying to uplift him from all the stuff he was taking in that wasn't really healthy.
Right.
Um, and also, I, again, go back to the nature, I when I was feeling very overwhelmed by his needs and mine, and trying to get some space.
Which is I think such a universal experience for adults taking care of aging parents, especially
Yeah,
when they're
absolutely.
ill, right?
Yeah. uh, I would have the opportunity of literally walking like very, I don't know, 500 yards
Mm-hmm.
onto this common, and I would
Mm-hmm.
sit by that pond, the same
Mm-hmm.
pond where I saw the dragonfly.
Right.
And then one day I saw this amazing yellow iris flower, and I took a photograph of it. And then what I did was later, um, after Dad had gone, unfortunately, he had to go into a nursing home. But while that was all happening, I actually managed to transform the photograph that I put on my mobile phone, and transformed it by taking it to the photography people and putting it on a canvas. And I've got it now in my
Mm-hmm.
chalet hanging up.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that it looks wonderful, but it also evokes a lot of story, a lot of things that were happening.
And so
Uh,
I hear, so in that time that you were helping your father come into the present, which is what you were describing earlier in our conversation, come into the present and in the here and now, with color, with attention on a painting or on a coloring book, and that brought him peace, and then also you, because when we're caring for another person, so much of that is helping their mood. It's not just about, sorry, let me take a little drink here,
mm, to
raspberry leaf
cheers.
tea. It's not just about caring for your father's physical needs, but
Mm,
very much about caring for his emotional needs. And there's a certain, I think, human beings, when we love each other, when we are family members, there are times when we buffer and buoy each other emotionally.
mm,
And so I think you were noticing that your ability to buffer and buoy was at its limit. And so then that you were able to find a pathway to peace for him and thereby also for you.
mm,
And something about the telly being an important method of staying in touch with the outer world, and something about the responsibility that we have collectively to to elevate and balance the good with the bad. There's something about, it's important to know about the ills and the sadnesses of the world, because that gives us an opportunity to do something
yeah.
about it. But if we get to the point where we can't do anything about it, and so here you have your father yelling at the telly, and I think we can all relate to that
Yeah.
activity. Yelling at the telly, and at a place in his life that he can't go out and you know campaign for a new candidate, or uh, hire somebody and get them off the streets and out of poverty, or whatever it would be that he might have done or wanted to do as an earlier version of himself, to redirect him into bringing peace. Because again, this podcast is about peace as an action verb, right? And so to bring peace into his own life, to bring peace into your life, and that you redirected him towards that with attention to color, attention
Mm,
to conversations over Zoom, which is like, I think, a more healed version of the telly, right? Because the telly is a one directional, a unidirectional communication, but Zoom, we can actually touch each other, interact with each other.
mm.
So, and then I also just wanted to point out that you are very aware of color. So there was the blue dragonfly and there was the yellow iris.
Yeah,
And the importance of that, the importance of noticing it was a yellow iris.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That also reminds me of my mum, because I was listening to this uh this lovely couple, Lizzie and Justin, that do this thing, Turning Towards Life. Um, and they take sources, and then they have a completely unplanned, unscripted conversation, which they then share to whoever wants to tune in. And it was a lovely poem by John Donahue. I don't know if heard of him, but I really like some of his work. And
He can you tell us a little bit more? He is, I think he's passed already. Irish, yes.
yes, I don't know much about the author,
Okay.
but just sort of occasionally come across some really amazing poetry by John Donahue
Mm-hmm.
that is very insightful and resonates
Mm-hmm.
often. And I can't remember the actual phrase in the poem, but Lizzie was confessing as a mum when you have a young child. Um, she was reflecting through the poem about how important it is to be able to foster time with your child, because when we're so busy or we're so stressed by life, often the child and yourself in the relationship, the child often has something they want to share or something of wonder to stay with, and you're hoiking them off to the car to go to the next appointment, whereas
Right.
actually, and I wanted, I actually wrote to her after listening to this, because again it sparked off a memory of my mum, of when I was very little, and we used to go on so-called walks to the park, that she would often really give time, because she would, from quite early on, I wasn't in those horrible straps with reins. She allowed me to walk.
Yeah.
She allowed
Although
me
I
to
have to
walk.
say,
Oh no,
having
some
had,
people like them and feel they're safe. I,
I
I understand that.
yeah, no, our nephew was very, very fast, still is as an adult, but I remember when he was 4, I really wished that I had one of those because I thought the weekend that we were taking care of him, if I did not catch him before he crossed traffic or,
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
but
Yeah,
your
I
mother, so
understand.
your mother did not have you on a harness and a leash, so you were able to explore.
This is why I'm so wild sometimes. Um, yeah, she. So we would. She would allow. I realised she must have built in time for us to go on a walk longer than normal a person would walk, because of she
Right.
knew that I was fascinated by the bush, or the dog poo,
Sure, you would stop and
or
admire and
yeah.
absorb
So
whatever was
this
upon your.
poem was very much about remembering in this life that there are moments where it's really important to allow ourselves to feel that beauty of nature, or to allow the child to sense of wonder.
Mm.
And I remember my mum allowing me to, when I had my wellies, she allowed me to stand in this puddle, and then a leaf was falling from the tree and she wanted to move on, but I was watching this leaf gliding and swirling down, and it sort of went into the puddle, and then I didn't want to bash it, but I was watching it move, and I just thought I did the same with my children when I could. I know,
Mm-hmm,
of
mm-hmm,
course,
mm-hmm.
we don't have endless time as parents, but it was just the consciousness to actually try and find a way to perhaps have moments where you drop your adult stuff, and just be with the child and your own child, perhaps you
And there's
know
something about when we are children, uh, and this I say this as a prayer because I know this isn't every child's experience, but we are feeling safe, and something about that sense of safety, or even it's more like we're not having the sense of fear. It's an absence of the sense of fear, and in that absence of fear, there is the present moment, and there is the ability to absorb the wonders and the miracles and the magic of life around us, and the magic of a leaf floating and dancing its way
mm.
from the tree to the puddle and then moving differently in the water than it did in the air, like that magic. And something about the parent or the adult companion of the child remembering to detach from that the fear that drives us to say, I need to continue to make a living, or I need to continue to be able to survive. And I think as adults, we have that
Yeah.
around us a lot, and yet to remember there's always this present moment, and in the present moment there's wonder, and
Mm.
how special that you were given that gift of space and time as a child, and that as a mother yourself, that you reminded yourself to any moment that you could to give
Mm.
your own children that
Mm.
space.
Yeah. And to be honest, the in my own childhood, there were um, dysfunctions, of course, and there were some trauma too, due to my parents not being in tune with their own needs or whatever, that affected me. So I think it's wonderful when they've gone that I can integrate and realize, and maybe even allow myself as a parent, of all the mistakes I've made with my own children, to sort of not forget, because you can't forget if you've got trauma. Sometimes it will continue if you don't get it healed, but to put it in context and to I don't know, I don't even know the words to express it, but it's something about acknowledging we all have the potential to make mistakes and harm,
Mm.
um, and I'm sure in different degrees at different times we can behave in ways which we're not proud of or would have
And
preferred.
actually, on the list of peace verbs that I have in front of me, I make mistakes and let go of being perfect and right.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, I think it's important that you're touching on, so you've been telling us some wonderful stories about the rightness in your family, and then to acknowledge that there was also trauma. And I believe that that's true for, if not all of us, then most of us.
Yes. Yeah.
And that it is something that passes down through generations, that trauma. And so you're also talking about the verbs that relate to grieving and the verbs that relate to healing. And so I heard you say acknowledge. I also heard you say that we all have the ability, and I think also the behavior, right, to do
Mm,
harm.
mm,
And yet there's a forgiving, and
mm,
there's also an element of time traveling, because you are remembering, you are going back to, and you are integrating those
mm.
experiences.
Yeah.
And so recognizing that there were both, and finding a way um to see the wholeness of it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah.
That's true, and that's probably a lifetime's process. But I
Yes.
just didn't want it to come across that it's just all this wonder and joy, because I thought, oh no, I can't not acknowledge the difficult challenges as well that influence me.
And to
But
and to witness. So another piece verb is witnessing,
mm,
bearing witness, and also being witnessed. And so I think when you were remembering the traumas that influenced you, you were also bearing witness to yourself as a younger person,
yeah, yeah,
and how important it is to do that, because that younger person deserves to be recognized.
yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's true. And also, it's because this is obviously going out to other people. Um, I love both my parents, and there's no way I would disrespect them, or I It's just more, like you say, to give a holistic picture of our capacities as humans all over.
Yes.
Um, and it's universal, really. It's just we have different patterns. And also, I think part of my journey, especially with the creativity that helps, is to not dwell in the past. I mean, to obviously not ignore it, not travel in places where it's difficult sometimes, but also to come back to the present moment. Sometimes, even now, if I have a sudden wave of grief or whatever, because it still obviously is quite fresh.
Mm.
Um,
The loss of your mom and dad.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and so I find there's times when I can find I feel their presence,
Mm.
in a sense of a memory, or maybe that's triggered by something I'm doing in the present. And I can be quite light and quite chatty with them,
Mm-hmm.
in my mind's eye,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily openly, verbally. If other people around,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise they might think it's a bit strange.
So you're having a conversation in your thoughts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And also, I'm actually, yeah, much more um, able to let go of my own judgments, um, without feeling I'm somehow um, not standing up for myself. I'm
Mm.
doing less. I think I'm doing less as I get to this point. Less fight and flight, and more. Um, oh, I don't even know the word, but more acceptance of mistakes, um, yeah, also seeing a more of a balance, maybe balance, that's another one of your words, a more balanced view.
Well,
And
there's many verbs that you just touched on, Sue. There's you talk about protecting yourself, and with even with some physical language of fists, right? Protecting yourself um, is about finding healthy boundaries, finding and
yeah,
holding healthy boundaries, and there's also this integration that happens over one's lifetime of as you move through the family experience and as you are younger and receiving trauma or you can't control that necessarily to there's a point in your life where you have agency, you can speak up for yourself, you can take a stand, and then you move on to the place where there's acceptance, forgiveness, integration, and balance. And I've heard you say also that there's something about putting yourself in your parents' shoes, and as you have also been a parent yourself, reflecting on the challenges of parenting, reflecting on the challenges of parenting within one's time, within one's need to support the family financially, that there's these pressures. So so then also I've also felt your energy shift in remembering the negative parts or the difficult parts. And so then, Sue, I also know that you are a magician of finding your path back. And so what is that moment, when you go through these dips and you are feeling the sadness and you're remembering the sorrow of it?
mm. I
How do you?
allow, I suppose, if I have the space, which I'm very good lately at, in a way, even understanding boundaries. I think I didn't have a sense of boundaries when I was younger.
Mm,
I think I've got still much to learn, because I haven't always got a clear understanding and acting to my boundaries, because I often find it quite hard to work out what my needs are, what someone else's needs are, and when I have to make a firm stand that this is a definite no, or creating space so that I'm not overwhelmed by others' needs, and yet also not feeling guilty that I'm being selfish. Those sort
Right.
of, you know,
Right.
dilemmas we all come across. But
Again, yes,
late,
quite
late,
universal.
yeah, lately, I suppose I've been doing more recognizing patterns of how my own script, if you like, has been implanted, and how to unlearn some of that, and be uncomfortable with the uncertainty of not fully knowing where I'm going, but
Oh, yeah.
trusting there's another presence. And I don't know if everyone believes that, but I believe that there's not just my ego, me, that there's another presence. I wouldn't necessarily call it God, or religious in a religious sense for
So,
me,
so what is, so,
a spiritual otherness that I can call on
yeah. And is
when
it,
I met.
but is it, sorry to interrupt you, but I think this is really important to pull, to pull the words in that can help make this clearer. Um, is it an other, or is it you from a higher space? Is it an otherness, or is it maybe a different octave or a different?
I
Uh,
don't know. I don't know for sure.
yeah.
I'm exploring that. I mean, I suppose a concrete example, which was when I was very ill after I had my son Max. My kidneys failed, so I was totally at death's door, really.
My
Uh,
goodness.
yeah, and uh, there was a point where I was slightly conscious, and I saw doctors and nurses working on my body, but I came out of the body. And then I went into this tunnel, um, and it was really a sort of sense of emptiness and spinning. And I wasn't terrified. I just was sort of puzzled and not sure what was happening, and yet also thinking, oh, this could be it. What's next? And then I actually experienced a sort of quite a spiritual awakening. It's hard to describe in words, but
Can you describe it in colors?
no, it wasn't colourful. It
No.
was light. There was a
Light.
white, a pinprick of a white light at the end
Yes.
of the tunnel.
Yes.
And as I got towards the light, I remember a voice. I didn't see a form, but I heard a very gentle, very loving voice. And also I felt this amazing warmth and absolute held by unconditional love. Like in my life, I've always had to have conditions to be loved or to love, but this was absolutely, I didn't have to do anything. I just was there in whatever form I was in. Maybe in some sort of level of surrender, I'm not sure, but I'm probably putting words on this now. But at the time, it was just, I remember coming out of my body, going through this tunnel, like a near-death experience, I think.
Yes. Yes.
And then the voice was saying, Sue, it's not your time.
Oh,
You,
wow.
you have more to do.
Wow.
And at that point, I was really ready to go. I
Yeah.
was ready to leave my baby, the world.
Yeah.
And I felt quite guilty when I came back that I'd even thought that, because my son was my life, as a,
Yeah.
and giving birth to him, and this trauma happened after I given birth to him, and of course we were separated. So that he was down in one hospital, and I was up in London in Guy's, while he was down in a
Oh,
hospital in
yeah,
Tunbridge Wells.
yeah.
Anyway, without going into all that detail, basically the strengths of that experience
Mm-hmm.
really shook me up
Mm,
when I came back into my body.
mm-hmm.
Um, because there have been times in my life where I've wanted to give up
Mm-hmm.
or wanted not to be here. But after that, it almost felt like um, there's a greater force than you, Sue. And it wants you to stay around, and it wants you to offer your gifts.
Mm.
And it will also be a source of strength when you feel you want to give up.
Amazing, amazing, and thank you for sharing from a deeply personal experience something that is so universal and important for us to all be reassured by. I feel like as humans, we all have those moments where we want to give up, and we all have those moments where we don't understand the path, for finding our way back to that place of peace. And so there's a trust and a knowingness and a feeling, a sense of feeling that you described. I mean, there was, you saw light, you heard a voice, and you felt. But most importantly, you felt, and it was unconditional love,
Yeah.
and being
And I,
held completely by that unconditional love, and then to be told you have things to do, that you have a to-do
I
list.
know. I mean, I waited all my life to have that experience of totally not having to do anything to get the love, and then I get told I've got to come back and do some more.
Yeah. So, but
No,
it
no,
seems
I'm only joking. It was actually very, very. I'm feeling quite emotional thinking about it, because it was like I don't know. I haven't got words, but it was very appropriate for me on whatever journey I'm on. It was a message that was heard loud and clear. And of course, when I actually recovered it, which took quite a long time,
yeah.
um, I like we all do, when you get these insights or awakenings from whatever source, higher source, say,
Mm.
um, we often get bogged down again in all
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
day to day, like we all do.
Do you know,
And
sorry, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Because the image that I have for that exact experience is that we're on a trampoline, and we bounce, and then we get to this, oh, we're above the clouds and we can see, and there's light, and we, whoa, and we come back right down. So,
exactly.
yeah. So you're saying we can get bogged down. We have these moments of connection with source, and then we get bogged down.
Yeah, and then we forget. We
We
forget
forget.
that un well, this is what I think. I mean, other people may not have any belief that helps them, but I think even if you haven't got belief in the spiritual side, the creativity is still very useful for people,
Mm.
because it may be that they've been taught certain ways of behaving or
Mm-hmm.
being,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be that if they were able to use other playful ways of exploring their life or their relationships with creative means. And that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean just art. It could be cooking, or it could be gardening, or it could be singing, anything, dancing. I love dancing.
Oh.
Oh, actually, that reminds me. Last night, I I haven't been out in the evening for quite a long time, and I went out with a friend yesterday morning, which was very nice, and she didn't want to go out in the evening, and I said, "Oh, well, okay, but I might just go on my own." There was this soul band, and it was quite interesting because I knew that before I could have got a ticket, but I was going to go down, because where it was, the bit where the band were was on the bandstand, and they put fencing around. They got security people to sort of keep out people who hadn't got a ticket. And
But this
I
is
was quite
outside. This is not inside.
outside
Okay.
on a place called the Pantiles, which is like a promenade
Oh.
where Queen Victoria in Tunbridge Wells used to take the waters.
Oh my goodness. So this is a
Yes,
very fancy commons.
yes, yes.
Okay.
I was prepared to pay for a ticket, but I went into the pub where you could get a ticket, and they said, "Oh no, they've all sold out."
Uh-huh.
And I was prepared for that. So I chatted to the security guard, who was a woman, and I said, "Oh, so the tickets have all sold out." I said, "Is it okay, presumably, if I stand here this side of the fence, and inside the fence was all these tables and chairs and posh umbrellas, and
Uh-huh.
the bandstand had the stage and the
Uh-huh.
band, and I was outside the fence. And when they started playing the music, I was dancing,
Mm.
just free dancing.
Mm-hmm.
And although I was slightly self-conscious, I was more interested in dancing than worried about what people thought of me. Anyway, then I got a bit more conscious of other people, and I thought, oh, I'll just go and have a little break. So I went in and got myself a drink, um, and I was sitting further away from the fence, and then there was a group of people younger than me, but there was a couple of women who were coming out and dancing. And so I thought, great. So I went and joined them. And so we were dancing and interacting to the music. And everybody sitting down was sat down. They weren't moving. They were
Right.
eating and just
Right.
sitting.
Right.
And I thought, this is so obviously they were probably still eating, and they weren't ready to dance because they probably had enough to drink. But I don't drink. I have maybe one drink, and I'm fine because I love dancing so much. I don't need to get drunk.
Sure.
Anyway, what was so funny was that after a while, the band, uh, obviously not getting, they were getting a reaction from the audience, but not dancing.
Right.
And the security people saw all the people, there was only a small group of us, about, I don't know, 8 of us dancing outside the fence.
Yeah.
So they let us in.
Because you
They
could
opened,
elevate the mood by
yes,
the permission
yes,
to
the
move.
energy. And
Yeah. The interaction that a band is, a band lives for people to jump up and dance, right? Isn't that the
I
most
mean,
wonderful affirmation for the musicians when
yeah,
it
yeah. So
moves
that
when
was,
it literally moves people.
but that was because I was, um, uh, sometimes it takes some courage to take a risk, because I haven't.
Yes.
I've split up from my partner, and he wouldn't have gone dancing anyway. But it was like I felt, look, I'm not going to stay in my chalet locked away, just doing
Right.
my creative stuff on my own. I'm going to go and find some people.
And to dance together and to be out
Yeah,
at night. It reminds me of your mom, right? Like she was out at night
yeah, that's true.
playing music for people to
Oh,
dance.
absolutely. And a young man called Elliot wanted to dance with me, and he wasn't drunk, because I
Mm,
thought, oh, if he's drunk, I've got to watch out, because you
mm.
never know what they're like. They could be a bit alien. But
Sure,
no, he
sure.
was lovely. He was lovely, and we just had a little dance, and then and he said to me, "You're an angel," and I thought, oh, I must have my angel with me.
But then again, Sue, I had used that word just a few minutes ago, right? The earth angels
Yeah,
you know that we all are, and that there's something about you. You gave permission to others to be wonky, right? That word of of being oneself, even if that is outside of the bounds
mm,
of the proper etiquette of the community.
yes,
And us Americans like to think that British people are more proper than we are, although we have just as many societal rules and boundaries. I think we're just a little bit less fancy about them. But it's just wonderful that you gave yourself permission. You also gave yourself permission to take a break, right? Because there is something about the safety of not putting oneself out in the public eye when maybe that's just too much exposure. So you said, well, I'll just go have a drink, and you let yourself sit down. But then there were other women that were dancing, and then you said, okay, now's my time. So they gave you permission, and then you all had some sort of critical mass of permission. And then you
yeah,
were invited to the inside. You were no longer, it's just so symbolic. There was an inside and an outside, and then you were invited to the inside, and being there gave everyone else more permission to maybe just do this in their seat. I don't know. Did you see that
Yeah,
happening?
yeah, there were more people got up, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also there were some rules, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't totally chaotic, which was good because the
Right.
security guys were saying you're not allowed to take drinks
Okay.
in there, and you're not allowed to get on the stage, just
Yeah.
basic, which was good
Boundaries. There were
because
boundaries.
there were the boundaries. It wasn't like we sort of broke in and
Sure.
stormed the stage and ruined it for everyone. It was very much, oh, come on, we've got some energy we want to share,
Yeah.
let us in.
Yeah. What
And also
fun.
that I didn't stay that long. I'd stayed enough for me, and I let the young people get on with their thing, and I
Right.
didn't feel in any way deprived. I felt I had my fix of fun, and enjoyed myself.
Well, you actually, there's a few more verbs here. You
Yeah.
found and followed your own path, and you practiced right timing. You
Yeah.
practiced right timing. So there was the moment to be there, and then there was the moment to leave.
Yeah.
So I am hearing. I'm
God, it's so
hearing.
lovely. It's so lovely to be heard.
Oh,
It's so gorgeous.
and I am
Because I've
just.
often on my own a lot lately, and it's like it's very. I'm noticing this is very rich because it's sort of almost giving me permission to acknowledge all I've gone through. I feel
Yeah,
quite.
and so we can even just take a moment to touch on that witnessing witnessing is a peace verb, being witnessed is a peace verb, storytelling is a peace verb, just so important. And so you are actually by gifting me with your stories and allowing me to interrupt you and to talk about verbs, you are helping me bring a dream to life. I've so I'm just going to take a moment to shift the camera over here. This is my
Oh, that's your wall of all the verbs.
yes, yes,
Wow.
and so you
Because
are.
at
What's
first I
that?
wasn't sure. Sorry, darling, interrupted you.
No, please.
I get excited. Sorry.
Me too.
um, it's At first I was thinking, how can I connect creativity to peace verbs? And now I sort of get it. It's in the doing and the unfolding. It sort of becomes more apparent.
and
So I'm go
so,
on.
so I was just going to say that my cutting these verbs out and putting them on this wall was, I don't know, a four maybe 6 month process, and I was being called, and
Wow.
so I think that you have described very similar experiences of you become a channel or a conduit for something divine. I'm going to just give it that name.
Yeah, yeah, no, I
The
agree.
divine coming through you. And
You don't have to apologize for the word divine because that.
okay. And so I think that when any one of us give ourselves that permission to be the conduit, and at that time in my life I thought this is something to do with a business that I'm starting, but I have no idea how
Yeah.
this relates. And I probably shouldn't quit my job just to do this podcast, but I really, really wanted to.
Mm.
and, and so you are affirming my trust in that vision by being the lovely guest that you are being. And so I just want to thank you for co-creating with me.
Oh, I love it. I love being able to with you. It's great.
Thank you. Thank
It's
you.
very um yeah.
So I want to go back to what we were just talking about, which was your dancing experience last night,
Oh yes.
because it
Mm.
started in the morning. It started in the morning with your friend, and you said you floated the idea of going out at night, and your friend said she didn't really think she wanted to, and you said I'm going to do it. So there was you were giving yourself permission to hear your intuition and to follow on it and to seek joy
Yeah.
and to give
When I
yourself
came
permission.
because when I came home, the thing with me that happens, I come up with this, yeah, and then what happens is a little time elapses, and then the
fear or the doubt creeps in and picks
Yes.
away. Oh, he might not be safe at night. He might meet some weirdos, or they might be drunk, or a load of that. But
Right.
what happened? I allowed all those, and then I thought, I'm a grown woman. I have sovereignty where I stand. I can be in my space and I can look after myself. And also, it started raining and I hadn't got a coat. So there was all these things that could have prevented me.
Yeah.
But there was a real, like you say, it was almost like I was called to go.
You're called
And
by the
it's
joy.
like
The
the
joy was,
universe. Yeah, exactly. It was like an opportunity was being offered. And if I slammed the door or played safe this time,
yeah.
then it would be something I would regret and would have
And yet,
missed.
and yet you did allow yourself to go back to safety. I think that's an important
Oh
part of the
yeah, no, I
story.
didn't
So,
risk. Yeah,
so you had an internal conversation with the parts of you that were feeling the need to keep you safe, right? There's
yeah,
there's that voice
yeah.
that we all have,
Protect.
that the inner
Yeah,
critic is also the inner caretaker, I think,
yes,
right?
protection.
And so you said to your inner critic slash caretaker, I hear you. I'm listening to you, reminding me of the things that I should be aware of. And you squared your shoulders and said, I'm a grown woman
Mhm.
and I can do this.
Yeah,
And then you went out, and yet there was that moment that you thought, oh, maybe I'll go sit down. Maybe I'll.
yeah,
So you did allow yourself, and I think that's important because it's finding balance.
yes,
It's
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yes, because in the past, I might have heard my little warning intuition and not listened to it because I was enjoying myself so much. But then there would have been another thing that have happened that would have made it important that I would have listened to it. Nothing terrible, but just made my life more uncomfortable than maybe if I'd
Sure.
taken note. But usually it's if it's meant to be, I know that I've got the antennae to pick it up, and
Yes.
then I choose whether I follow it or not. And I don't now. I used to sometimes allow other people to persuade me not to do something or to do something, but now I'm
But wait,
much
but
more. No, I have to go inner and check my own compass here. Where
and
where am I with this?
and that's so
And,
universal too. That is so universal too. We let other people tell us
yeah.
yes or no for an activity.
Mm,
And then you
mm,
said, but you are allowing yourself to listen to your, there's two words that you use, two nouns, antennae and internal compass.
mm,
And how interesting. So insects use antennae to sense the world around them. They are a sensory organ.
mm, mm,
And you were talking about your connection to the dragonfly, right?
mm.
And so the antennae, and then also the internal compass, which is, I don't know, you can't see on camera, but I'm holding my gut. And so a compass is a directional tool. It's a tool for finding a path. So how
Mm,
very beautiful that you have accessed these internal tools of
mm,
sensing and directing for
mm.
yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do, and I don't always. It's funny. I'm all right when I'm on my own. I can do that. But if I'm with a partner or another person,
Hmm.
I sometimes allow them to compromise that navigation. And I think it's because I think, maybe I'm being too selfish. Maybe
Interesting.
because
Yeah.
in a relationship, you do obviously sometimes have to make compromises because
Right.
the person doesn't always feel as excited or as interested as you. And there's usually ways you can do it anyway, a different time or a different person or whatever. But
Right.
I find sometimes when I'm with someone I care about, um, I can, without even realizing it, start adapting more and more to meet their needs and forget mine. Not totally, I'm not a doormat, but equally, um, because sometimes they impose something, and at first you think, oh, they're so sure and they're so confident, and then after a while you think, actually I don't really agree with that, maybe I shouldn't, you know. And then you have to work out, negotiate, you know, where you go next for yourself within that.
And it's a dynamic process, isn't it? Of
Yeah,
finding and holding healthy boundaries and balancing and
yeah,
compromising.
and I'm still
Being,
working on those, definitely.
yeah, I'm sure we all are. I don't know that that is a process that ever ends. It's more of a refinement and an exploration.
Yeah, 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 definitely.
So many lovely piece verbs, Sue, and we started with a noun. Our noun was creativity or creative process.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I did reflect on them when you left them in the email. I did go over them, not to make sure they come up, but just to make sure they're in the back of my mind as we were talking, so
Thank
that
you.
I sort of was acknowledging the work you've done and wanting to, yeah, be guided by you, but also to, with certain ones I thought, oh yeah, definitely mention that one somewhere.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That is an act of co-creation, very much so. And similar to what you were talking about, and definitely your skill set is coming to play in how do you hold a space or how do you facilitate a creative process for another person. And so you were noticing, I think you were noticing yourself as a teacher. You were noticing how I was also attempting to hold a space.
I
And
did.
yeah,
You have, very well. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah. Because I haven't felt, even though you were guiding me, I didn't see it as a intrusion or interruption. You did it very well and very naturally, gently, and helped me sort of acknowledge how that was mutually useful to both of us in this conversation.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah.
So this is wonderful. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on, or have we completed?
I think we've completed. I'm sure there was loads more I could have said about creativity, but I think I hope people can find a way to play with their possible creativity and not be put off by their inner critics.
Or their outer critics, for that matter, right?
Oh, well, they're always there, aren't they? I think the inner one's the hardest one to manage.
Yeah, yeah. I think the inner critic is trying to. So we have an expression here. I don't know if it's an expression in British English, but we say "head off at the pass," which is, if in Western folklore, if you are journeying together and you're coming up over a mountain pass and you're coming down and maybe you're going to get ambushed on the other side of the pass, and so to head off at the pass is to avoid that ambush. And so I think the inner critic is very much about avoiding the ambush of the outer critics.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I value my inner critic at times when it's trying to protect or calm me, because sometimes I get so excited and a bit, I think I've got, yeah, I did this project where I spent weeks doing these illustrations for a fantastic new method of storytelling, and I got really excited and I got some people interested, and then it all suddenly, like a bit like with you doing the business, it sort of suddenly all imploded, and I haven't told the story. But I thought the other day, thanks partly to me connecting with you, it's just not it'll come. It's just not the right time. Right. And I got trust. There will be a source to use that work at another time. And I perhaps got a bit too much sort of ego going on there, or not even ego, maybe just excitement of finding something that was new to me and wanting to share it, but not perhaps understanding the best way to put it out there and to connect with people in a way that they would enjoy.
And
So
it's something about it, you know, so just coming back to you and the firefly. So there was this inner process of the journaling and the identification of the firefly as the animal that was connecting with you, and then you went and you took a walk and you found the firefly. So you were in a creative process. You felt that you had a very special gift to offer to other people, and yet you didn't know how to make that connection, and the sense of frustration and worry or losing the hope that one feels when one has this creative gift and then doesn't see the way to connect, but then to trust. You know, you're taking a walk, or maybe you're on a boat that's floating down a river and the river has meanders and you think you're going in this direction, but what you're really doing is you're coming back in this direction and then you're going back in that direction, and
yeah,
you meet
yeah,
the people maybe 4 bends down the river, not at the first
yeah,
bend.
right.
And to have that trust.
Yeah, I think this has been the year of learning to trust myself. Absolutely. And it's been very lovely speaking to you. Thank
Oh,
you.
likewise, likewise. Thank you for being the bright start to my day.
Yeah, I know it's an early start. Well done. Thank you for taking account of the time difference.
Oh, sure, sure.